My name is Olivia. I am 23 years old. And 18 months ago, I woke up in a hospital bed with a tube in my arm, a bandage wrapped around my head, and a phone full of notifications that had nothing to do with whether I was alive or dead. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to understand something. I was not the kind of person anyone worried about. I was the kind of person everyone counted on. There is a difference, a big one, and it took nearly dying for me to finally see it. Let me take you back to the spring semester of my senior year at Ohio State. 4 years of a double major in education and psychology. 4 years of working the opening shift at a coffee shop 6 days a week. 4 years of maintaining a 3.97 GPA while my family back in Columbus went on with their lives, like I was just a background character in a story that starred my older sister, Danielle. Danielle is 26. She never finished college. She has a personality that fills every room she walks into, the kind of laugh that makes strangers turn around, and parents who have spent the last decade treating her unfinished sentences like they were poetry. She got engaged in February. His name is Brandon. His family has money, the old quiet kind, and from the moment that ring went on her finger, my parents stopped existing in any reality that did not revolve around a wedding. I found out I was going to be valedictorian on a Tuesday afternoon. I called my mom first, the way you do when something huge happens, and your instinct is still to reach for the people who raised you. She picked up on the third ring, and I could hear Danielle in the background talking about centerpieces. I told her, valedictorian, the whole graduating class. She said, "Oh, sweetheart, that is wonderful." Then she said, "Hold on." And I listened to 45 seconds of centerpiece conversation before she came back and told me she had to go because the florist was on the other line. I sat in my car in the university parking garage for about 10 minutes after that, not crying, just sitting. My grandfather, Grandpa Roy, called me that same evening. I had not even told him yet. Mom must have mentioned it. He said, "Olivia Jean, I always knew." Just like that, no qualifiers, no distractions. I always knew. His voice was the same as it had been my whole life, steady and warm, like something that does not change no matter what else does. He told me he had already cleared his calendar for graduation day. He told me he was going to be in the front row, and he was going to be so loud they would probably ask him to leave. I laughed for the first time all week. Grandpa Roy is my mother's father, 78 years old, retired high school principal, widower. My grandmother Eleanor passed before I was born, but I grew up hearing stories about her. Everyone always said I looked like her. Same jaw, same stubborn eyes. I never thought much of it until later. 6 weeks before graduation, my mom called with news. The whole family was flying to Scottsdale, Arizona, for a pre-wedding planning retreat. Brandon's parents had rented a resort for a long weekend. The trip was the first weekend of May. Graduation was May 11th. I did not immediately connect the dates, and neither, apparently, did my mother. When I did the math out loud, she got quiet. Then she said the flights were already booked. Then she said Brandon's parents had coordinated everything, and it would be awkward to rearrange. Then she said, "You know how independent you are, Liv. You have always handled things so well on your own." There it was. That sentence. The one that sounds like a compliment and functions like a dismissal. I told her I was giving the valedictorian speech, in front of thousands of people. She said she knew, and she was so proud. Then she asked if I could drop off Danielle's dry cleaning before I left campus for the summer. I want to be honest with you. I did not explode. I did not cry. I said I would see what I could do. Then I hung up and went back to my thesis revisions, because that is what I always did. I kept moving. I told myself it was fine. I was good at telling myself things were fine. My best friend Cassie had a different read on the situation. She showed up at my apartment that Friday with a bag of food and an expression I recognized as her intervention face. She sat across from me at my kitchen table and said, "They are skipping your graduation for a resort weekend." I said it is complicated. She said it is really not. She was right. It was not complicated. It was just painful, and I had spent 4 years learning to call painful things complicated so they were easier to carry. The headaches started in April. At first I thought it was caffeine and stress. I was pulling doubles at the coffee shop, finishing my thesis, rehearsing my speech. A headache made sense. I took ibuprofen and kept going. Then came the nosebleeds. Then one morning I reached for my travel mug and my hand missed it entirely. Just grabbed air, and I stood there, in my kitchen, staring at my own hand like it belonged to someone else. I told myself I needed sleep. I told Cassie I was fine. I texted Grandpa Roy that I was nervous about the speech, and he sent back a voice message that was 40 seconds of him telling me Eleanor had been afraid of public speaking too, and that she had given the most beautiful toast at their wedding that made half the room cry, and that courage was not the absence of fear. It was deciding the fear did not get to win. I saved that voice message. I still have it. 3 weeks before graduation, I was covering a morning shift when my vision went sideways. Not blurry. Sideways, like the room tilted on an axis that only I could feel. I grabbed the counter. My coworker Jess was there immediately, asking if I was okay, and I told her I had not eaten enough, which was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that it had happened twice before, and I had not told anyone. If you have ever been the reliable one, the one people lean on, the one who handles things, you understand why I did not say anything. You start to believe, somewhere deep and unexamined, that needing help is a kind of failure. That showing weakness will cost you the only thing people seem to value in you. I called my doctor that afternoon and made an appointment for the week after graduation. I told myself it could wait 10 days. I had a speech to give. The week before graduation, Danielle called me for the first time in 2 months, not to ask how I was doing. To ask if I could find a specific shade of blush ribbon for the welcome bags, because the ones Mom ordered were too pink. I found the ribbon. I mailed it to my mother's house. I do not know why I did that. Old habit, I guess. Grandpa Roy called the night before graduation. He was already in Columbus, staying at a hotel 15 minutes from campus. He said he wanted to show me something after the ceremony, something he had been holding on to for a long time. He said it was from Eleanor. He said she had left specific instructions that I was to have it on the day I graduated college. I asked him what it was. He said tomorrow. Just get some sleep, Olivia Jean. Tomorrow. I did not sleep. My head hurt too much, graduation morning. My phone had a text from my mom. Landed safely. Scottsdale is gorgeous. So proud of you, baby. Wish we could be there. There was a photo attached. My parents and Danielle by the hotel pool, sunglasses on, drinks in hand. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on the bathroom counter and finished getting dressed. Cassie drove me to campus. She did not say much, which was exactly right. She just drove and let me stare out the window, and when we pulled in, she squeezed my hand and said, "You worked 4 years for this." I said, "I know." She said, "No, you actually did. Let yourself have it." The staging area was loud and chaotic. 2,000 graduates in caps and gowns, families streaming into the stadium, the smell of sunscreen and nervous energy. I checked my speech cards twice. My hands were shaking, but I told myself it was adrenaline. I spotted Grandpa Roy from across the field, front row, center section, holding a manila envelope in both hands. He waved when he saw me. I waved back and felt something settle in my chest, something that had been unmoored for weeks. They called my name, Olivia Jean Mercer. Valedictorian, the applause was enormous. I walked to the podium. The sun was brutal. I gripped the microphone and found Grandpa Roy's face in the crowd. He was beaming. Cassie was next to him, phone raised to record. 2 seats beside them were empty. I started speaking. I had rewritten the speech 6 times and I knew every word. I talked about resilience. I talked about what it means to build something from nothing. I talked about the people who believe in you even when you forget to believe in yourself. And then the ground moved. That is the only way I can describe it. The ground moved, and the lights went wrong, and the words I had memorized for months turned to smoke. I heard my own voice say something about gratitude, and then the microphone was very far away, and the pane behind my left eye was a white wall, solid and blinding. I heard Grandpa Roy make a sound. I heard Cassie shout my name, and then I did not hear anything. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to ask you something. If you have ever been the person in the background, the one who keeps everything running while everyone else takes up space, the one who achieves and accomplishes and holds it all together and still feels invisible, I need you to comment the word invisible right now. Because I spent 23 years wondering if that feeling was just me. It was not just me. And if you want to know what my family did when they found out I was in emergency brain surgery, stay with me, because it is about to get very real. The paramedics reached me in under 4 minutes. Cassie told me that later. She told me a lot of things later, in the order she could stand to say them. At the hospital, the CT scan and MRI took less than an hour. The neurosurgeon met with Cassie and Grandpa Roy in a private waiting room and told them there was a mass pressing on the frontal lobe, and it needed to come out that day. She told them they needed family consent to proceed. Cassie called my parents' numbers from my phone. My mom's went to voicemail 3 times. My dad picked up on the 4th call and Cassie told him exactly what was happening. Brain tumor. Emergency surgery. Right now. My dad said, "We are in Arizona." He said, "There is nothing we can do from here." He said, "She is going to be fine. She is always fine." Cassie told me that was the moment Grandpa Roy took the phone out of her hand and spoke to my father directly. She said she had never heard his voice like that before. Quiet in a way that was worse than yelling, he told my father that his daughter was about to go into brain surgery and that if he chose not to come home, he would not be welcome to pretend he was part of her life once it was over. My dad said they would look at flights in the morning. Grandpa Roy signed the consent forms as my emergency contact. I had added him 3 weeks earlier on a form I barely remembered filling out. Some part of me knew, I think. Some part of me that was paying attention to what the rest of me kept explaining away. I was in surgery for 6 hours. Grandpa Roy sat in that waiting room the entire time. Cassie went home once to get food and came back within 90 minutes. The tumor was benign. The surgeon said they had removed it completely. She said another few weeks and the outcome would have been very different. I woke up 2 days later. The ceiling was white. There was a monitor beeping to my left. Grandpa Roy was asleep in a chair with his head tipped back and his reading glasses still on. Cassie was curled up on a cot in the corner with a hospital blanket pulled to her chin. I said, "Cass." It came out as barely anything, just air with a shape. She woke up instantly. She was at my side before I could try again, and the way her face fell apart and then pulled itself back together is something I will never forget. Grandpa Roy woke up a few seconds later and he just said, "There she is." He took my hand and held it and did not say anything else for a while, and that was exactly right. I asked about my parents. Cassie and Grandpa Roy exchanged the kind of look that meant they had already talked about how to tell me. She handed me my phone. I had missed 61 calls, 40 from my dad, the rest from various family members and neighbors I assume he had recruited. There were 17 texts. Every single one of them was a variation of "call us back," or "we need to talk," or "this is urgent." Not one said, "Are you okay?" Not one said, "We are coming." I opened Instagram before I could stop myself. My mother had posted 14 hours earlier. A photo of the 3 of them, her and my dad and Danielle, standing in front of a cactus at sunset, arms around each other. The caption said, "Good for the soul. Sometimes you just need family time away from the noise." Away from the noise. I put the phone face down on the mattress and looked at the ceiling for a long time. They arrived on day 4. I heard my mother's voice in the hallway before she came in, asking a nurse which room, speaking at full volume the way she does when she wants to be seen handling something. She came through the door with her arms already open and her face arranged into the expression I had seen my whole life, the one that meant she was present but performing, not quite landed in the actual moment. She said, "Baby." She said, "We came as fast as we could." I said, "You came on day 4. She said the flights were complicated. I did not argue. I was too tired to argue, and I had also just had brain surgery, so my bandwidth for pretending was at an all-time low. My dad came in behind her and stood near the door like he was not sure of his welcome, which was accurate. Danielle came in last. She was on her phone. She looked up, registered me in the hospital bed, said, "Wow, you really did faint, huh?" and then looked back at her phone. Cassie, who had not left except to shower, made a sound I had never heard her make before. Grandpa Roy was in the chair beside me. He did not stand. He did not greet them. He just looked at my father and said, "Douglas," and that one word carried everything. My mom started explaining. The flights, the resort, the family commitment, the impossibility of getting back sooner. My dad nodded along like backing track. Danielle discovered there was no cell service near my room and left to find better signal. I let my mother talk. When she finished, I said, "You were watching Instagram stories from the pool while I was in surgery." She said she did not know it was that serious. I said, "Cassie told you on the phone." She said Cassie was panicking and they did not want to overreact. Then she said something I was not prepared for. She said she needed me to understand that it was not easy for her either. That seeing me like this brought up things she had never dealt with. That she had always struggled with me specifically. And not because of anything I did, but because of what I reminded her of. I asked her what I reminded her of. She looked at my grandfather and something shifted in the room. Some weight that had been sitting there for 23 years that nobody had ever picked up and examined. She said, "Your grandmother." She said Eleanor had made her feel small from the day she entered this family. Judgments wrapped in politeness. A standard that moved every time my mother got close to it. 25 years of being made to feel like a guest in her own marriage. And then Eleanor died, and then I was born. And I had the same eyes and the same jaw and the same stubborn silence. And every time my mother looked at me, she felt it again. The room was very quiet. I looked at my grandfather. His jaw was tight. He was looking at the floor. I said, "Mom." I said it slowly, because I needed to get this exactly right. I said, "I understand that you were hurt." I said, "I believe you that Eleanor was difficult and that it affected you in ways you are still carrying." I said, "I am sorry you went through that." Then I said, "I was a baby. I was a child. I spent 23 years trying to earn something from you that you had already decided I reminded you too much of someone else to give. That is not my fault. And it is not something I am able to keep absorbing," she cried. Real tears, the kind that come from somewhere deep. I did not comfort her. I sat with it. My dad said he knew he had let me down. He said he had told himself for years that my self-sufficiency meant I did not need him. He said he understood now that he had used my strength as permission to be absent. He could not look at me when he said it, but he said it. Danielle never really said anything. She stood in the doorway for the last part of the conversation and then left to check on Brandon. A week later, she posted a photo with the caption, "Healing is not linear and sometimes family is complicated." It got 400 likes. Now, here is the part nobody expected, and if you are still watching, this is the part you came for. Grandpa Roy reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and placed the manila envelope on my blanket. He had carried it with him since graduation day. He said it was time. He told me that 30 years ago, he and Eleanor had opened a savings account in trust for me. Not a college fund. Something else. Eleanor had called it Olivia's start because she had a feeling, even before I was born, even before they knew I was coming. She told Grandpa Roy that Douglas's family had a way of lifting one child and flattening another. And she wanted to make sure that if it happened again, the one who got flattened would have a foundation nobody could take from them. My mom went completely still. Grandpa Roy said the account had been accumulating interest for 23 years. He said he had never told my parents it existed. He said the only reason he mentioned it now was because he had told my father during a heated phone call from this hospital that if Douglas could not be bothered to come home while his daughter was in surgery, he would see to it personally that Grace had everything she needed without any of them. He opened in the envelope and showed me a document. Not the amount, not to everyone in the room. Just to me, it was enough to buy a house. It was enough to build a life completely from scratch, without asking anyone for anything. My mom started to speak. Grandpa Roy looked at her and she stopped. He said, "Eleanor left this for Olivia, not for the family, not for a wedding, for Olivia. And if any part of you came back here for this instead of for her, I think you already know who you are." The silence that followed was the longest of my life. My dad left quietly. My mom left crying. Danielle had been gone for an hour. And I sat in that hospital bed with my grandfather's hand over mine and Cassie's shoulder pressed against the bed rail, and I breathed, maybe for the first time in years, without holding anything back. I was discharged 11 days after surgery. The tumor was gone. The doctors called the outcome remarkable. I called it a second chance, and I intended to use it exactly that way. I used a portion of Eleanor's money to put a deposit on a small house 20 minutes from the school district where I had accepted a teaching position. 3 bedrooms, a porch, a yard with one enormous oak tree that I decided immediately I would never cut down. It was mine. The first thing I had ever owned that did not come with conditions attached. My dad calls on Sunday mornings now. We talk for about 20 minutes. He asks real questions. He listens to the answers. It is not repaired, but it is honest, and honest is more than we ever had before. My mom is in therapy. She told me that in a text she sent 3 months after the hospital. She said she was starting to understand the difference between feeling pain and passing it to someone else. I texted back one word, good. We are not close. But the door is open a centimeter, and I am willing to see what that becomes. Danielle blocked me for 4 months after the inheritance conversation got back to her through my mom. She unblocked me in January. She has not reached out. I am not waiting. Grandpa Roy came to see my classroom in September. He walked every aisle, looked at every poster, read every piece of student work I had pinned to the bulletin board. He stopped at one, a paragraph a student had written called What It Feels Like to Be Seen. He stood there reading it for a while. Then he turned around and his eyes were wet and he said, Eleanor would have loved this room. I said, I know, Grandpa. I think I am finally starting to know her. He brought me the letter. The one Eleanor had written before I was born. It was 2 pages, handwritten, sealed in a small white envelope with my name on the front. Written in a script I had never seen before but recognized immediately. The same stubborn slant my own handwriting has, the same pressure on the downstroke. She wrote that she did not know yet if I would be a girl or a boy, or who I would become. She wrote that she had watched this family for a long time, and she had seen the way it distributed love unevenly, and she wanted to correct it the only way she knew how. She wrote that she hoped whoever read this letter was standing on the other side of something hard and was still standing. She wrote, You do not have to earn your place in this world. You were born into it. That is enough. That has always been enough. I read it 3 times in the parking lot of my school, with the heat still coming off the pavement and the sound of my students at after-school practice drifting through the fence. I am not going to tell you everything is fixed. My family is what it is, complicated and slow to change and still capable of disappointing me in ways I did not see coming. But I am not invisible anymore. I stopped being invisible the day I decided that being unseen by the wrong people was not a verdict on my worth. I know who showed up. I know who stayed. And I know because a woman I never met left me a letter and a savings account and a face full of her own stubborn jaw, that I was never as alone as I felt. If you are the reliable one right now, the one who handles everything, the one who achieves in silence while everyone else takes up the space, I want you to hear this. Your effort is not the price of admission to your own family. You do not owe anyone your health or your limits or your crisis moments. The people who only call when they need something are telling you exactly who they are. And the people who sit in waiting rooms for 6 hours without being asked, those are your people. Find them. Keep them. Be that for someone else. Thank you for making it to the end of this. I mean that. If this story touched something in you, if you have ever felt like the forgettable one, leave a comment telling me where you are right now, physically and emotionally. I read every single one. Like and subscribe if you want to hear what happened when I finally opened a letter from a grandmother I never got to meet. That story is coming, and I promise you, it is worth the wait.